Everybody's favorite series got 2 new episodes last weekend, with the fast Freddie Slater show heading to Silverstone for the GB3 season opener. Familiar results in a brand new car. Hello and welcome, fellow motorsports fans. Of course, we had a lot more feeder series action than just GB3, and as always, I'm here to tell you all about it and to tell you all in detail why British F4 sucks. So let's get straight to it. Euroformula Open has started in Portimao, the first time out on track for the new car, so we gotta talk about the state of the series before we get to the racing. It may still be a small grid, but the addition of Nielsen Racing and a second BVM car already made for a lot more entertainment than the motorpark only show of previous years. And the car has very much kept its best quality. It is super racy. Probably the best out of all the F3/Formula Regional level cars, to be honest, maybe rivaled by Euro Cup 3 nowadays. And while the grid wasn't big or particularly high level at the front, it was rather closely matched throughout the weekend. I really only wish they had a more modern broadcast. I can't figure out for the life of me why they elect not to show the timing tower most of the time, even though they clearly have one. Yvan David was the star of the weekend, and I definitely laid him down as a top 2 driver in the series, but his predicted rival Tim Mikarczyk also had big issues all around, stalling off the line twice to really impact his results. At least he could make it to P3 in the last race of the weekend, I guess. Definitely expect the pole to strike back next round. While a lot of the field is a bit mediocre, we did have 2 rather surprising breakout drivers, Michael Shin and Ed Pearson. Shin in particular really impressed with great consistency, securing 3 P2s and making his way to the front no matter the circumstances. The guy really just keeps getting better every year. As a driver with no real karting background, I think he is a great example of how good you can still get if you just keep on grinding, and can afford to do so, of course. I have a thing for Koreans anyway, from all the days spent watching esports, so this was a bit of a personal highlight for me. Ed Pearson, on the other hand, has always been a bit anonymous in my book, so him showing proper front-running capabilities and even winning a race did come entirely out of left field for me. Sure, the stall did cost him some key points, but as far as I'm concerned, this was still showing intent as far as the title fight is concerned. GB3 also brought a new car and one with DRS, but I have to say the racing was still a tad mediocre compared to Euroformula and Europe. The results were interesting nevertheless. Fast Freddie Slater did it again, double victory from pole in the 2 regular races to start his European season on a high note. And Hillspeed as a whole looked rather competent compared to the last couple seasons. Sure, Slater did have a bit of a racing incident in the reverse grid, although one I personally wouldn't blame him for, but either way, the pace in clean air was absolutely stunning. I know this is only a partial program, but he would definitely be the prime title contender with this look. Instead, Noah Lyle has managed to add himself to the list of favourites a bit out of nowhere if you ask me. 2 great race starts to claim a double P2, even if he had nothing to fight Slater with. Then again, he also got caught up in the reverse grid chaos, quite the theme for most frontrunners to be honest. Rodin was probably the best team across the board, with Gianmarco Pradel and Alex Ninovic about as fast as expected, and crucially, Abby Pulling able to match the pair quite well, taking 2 strong finishes on her debut. Her performance was of course one of the biggest questions going into the season, and I am very pleased to see that her practice performance did translate to the races as well. Definitely looks like we'll get to see her on the podium this season in a regular grid race at some point, which would be huge for women in motorsports across the world. On the disappointment side, I do have to mention Hightech as a team. I did call them the strongest lineup going into the season, but the team has not really lived up to expectations so far. Only Nikita Johnson made the most of a mediocre situation by scoring consistent points, despite the aforementioned incident with Slater. Sure, Keanu Alazari was alright, and Deegan Fairclough had his weekend ruined in qualifying, and kinda made up for it with excellent reverse grid race, but I still expected a tad more from the trio. Last but not least, shout out to Will McIntyre. Not the best regular grid races, but still far and away the best driver for Elite Motorsport, admittedly not the hardest task in the world, and a fantastic dominant win in the reverse grid race to end his weekend on a high as well. GB4 is developing in a rather interesting direction, with the elite motorsport trio still firmly the fastest cars on track, but Daniel Ginchard leading the championship through sheer consistency and the great reverse grid victory. He is definitely fighting an uphill battle in terms of the title fight, but if he can do this while on the back foot, I'd certainly be interested to see what he can do when his team has the quickest car on track. Talking about the elite trio, Isaac Phelps and Alex Catoulas may have been taking turns with the wins, but in some ways the big boy climb from Ari Banzel in the reverse grid race actually impressed me the most out of the trio. They are all even on points, and quite fittingly so. At this stage it is absolutely impossible for me to pick a favourite out of these guys. A much welcome change after a couple rather one-sided seasons at the sharp end in GB4. I quickly want to address the elephant in the room, the female trophy, which I assume still gives a scholarship for F1 Academy. After Alicia Polmovsky's stunning performance last season, many people probably had high hopes for this grid. Unfortunately, all of the girls in this series are a bit bad at the moment. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a few proper newcomers that just don't have the experience even Polmovsky brought with her, so it is too early to write them off completely. Out of the more experienced trio of Ava Dobson, Megan Bruce and Holly Meow, Dobson remains the favourite, but if we're honest, she also hasn't really shown much so far other than surviving reasonably well in the chaos. Definitely a step down from last season, but then again, there is more than enough female talent racing elsewhere this year. Shout out to Dayton Coulthard. After an alright but kinda forgettable debut, he has found another gear this weekend, firmly fighting high up the mid-pack on merit and not just after a bunch of crashes. Certainly appears to be on the right trajectory, ideal considering he is probably a bit of a fan favourite. To complete the action at Silverstone, in the Ginetta Juniors we had a weekend of total Rocco Coronel dominance, continuing the trend from the first round and making it even better with pretty much a perfect weekend. Not a big surprise, again, I've rated him very highly even before this season, but this is really all the confirmation needed that his racecraft applies to cars as well. In some ways even cleaner than his karting days, although admittedly not quite as challenged yet. Fred Green and Alfie Slater also remain frontrunners, with Green looking more impressive, but Slater actually scoring more points just because he did not get caught up in an incident. Scott Lindblom, on the other hand, was both rather unlucky and also just not as impressive when it comes to charging through the pack. I'm sure he will improve though. Let's talk about the other frontrunners real quick. Colin Crone, Torrin Byrne, George Proudford Nelder and Joseph Smith did fight at the sharp end pretty consistently, even if Byrne in particular also could not avoid chaos whatsoever. It goes without saying that out of these four, Proudford, Nelder and Smith were by far the most impressive drivers, as the other two have an extra year of experience in a field full of rookies. Smith especially displayed proper frontrunner qualities and looked like the kind of guy who'll win a race at some stage, if anyone can break the Coronel dominance, that is. British F4 has kicked off as well, and I was really excited to see it streamed on YouTube for the first time, meaning I don't need some international negotiations to get a hold of the VODs. Unfortunately, they still don't actually give a fuck about British F4, only streaming the reverse grid race out of the three, so I won't give it too much attention either. Just trying to interpret the Wikipedia results is usually not my style. In the reverse grid race, the star of the day was definitely Martin Molnar. If only that red flag wouldn't have robbed him of a chance to take the win from Chase Fernandez. Overall, the sharp end looks largely like I expected, with the veterans coming in clutch, including August Raber continuing his great form from the winter, which was a pleasant surprise. From the rookie crowd, Fionn McLaughlin is by far the biggest prospect in my book, followed by Ethan Jeff Hall, and if you can count him as a rookie, Chase Fernandez. A name I did not have on my radar whatsoever though is Tommy Harfield. Literally only seen him race in a one-off British Karting Championship event, according to my notes, and let's just say it didn't exactly become a core memory of mine. He did leave an impression here though, with 3 great results on track, even if a penalty did cost him in race 2. Either way, I know they'll likely at least stream race 3 during most weekends as well, so we'll get to talk about it a bit more as the season goes on. I still think it is such a wasted opportunity to disrespect what is probably the 3rd most competitive F4 series in the world like this. Anyway, that was all for the Formula Racing already, but that means it is time for our quick weekly karting report. We've had the second Champions of the Future round this weekend, and in the OK Juniors, Noah Baglin found himself back on the top step with a pretty dominant weekend all things considered, controlling the race ahead of my, so far, breakout driver of the year, Luke Thal. Championship leader Henry Domain, still consistent as ever, but had to settle for P4 behind Williams Jr. Will Green with his first podium of the season. Jesse Phillips and P2 overall William Kaligia also close behind the pair. All in all, the Forza duo was just outgunned by the Kart Republic army this weekend. Round 1 winner Eiley Kreisen had an early incident and only recovered back up to P11 for a sizable points loss. Meanwhile, Dean Hugendorn had a bit of an off weekend all around, but put in an admirable drive in the final to salvage some crucial points, going from P31 all the way to P9 to keep himself well in the title hunt. And just a quick shout out, he may not have made the final, but Daniel Miron Lorente looked a fair bit better this time out overall, I thought. Turns out I actually predicted the future last time when I said I'd love to see him leave CRG and drive for one of the Kart Republic teams. He's now a DPK driver going forward, so hopefully we'll see him fighting in the top 10 of a final soon enough. And in the OK Seniors, this time there was no Christian Costoya to stop the Kart Republic army at the front. Costoya had an incident in the superheat, but put in a great recovery drive in the final all the way up to P5. The front was very much dictated by Iacopo Martinese, who continues his excellent run of form ahead of Tibor Ramikas and Kart Republic ace Joe Turney, the latter with a somewhat surprising lack of pace in comparison to his two young teammates. I am very glad to report that the girls also continued racing well throughout the weekend. This time Chiara Batic was joined by Prema/Iron Dames driver and Mercedes Junior Luna Flusha. Flusha has shown glimpses of speed in the past, most notably dominating Champions of the Future Academy last season, but has never really managed to string together a weekend on the top level. And while she did get taken out on lap 1 of the final, she was excellent throughout all the other races and really was a match for Batic for most of it. Women's motorsports has a stellar future ahead. On the flip side, I do have to call out Dries van Langendonk and Kenzo Craigie, both not showing up with their usual front-running form this time, mostly relegated to 2 more midfield drives, with Craigie really falling flat in the final. And Dries van Langendonk was out in an early incident anyway. Who of these guys I'm most excited for really changes every other weekend at this rate, with my love for Tibor Ramikas really the only constant. The others will surely bounce back next week in the Europeans though. And that was already it for the week. Next week we'll get the start of Italian F4 and Trekker, 3 of the 4 professional single-seater series and a bunch of smaller F4 series starting. It'll be the first week of the year where I won't be able to cover all of it, but I'll definitely keep you guys up to date with all the major series. But for now, it is your time to drop all of your thoughts, opinions and predictions down in the comments so we can get our lovely little discussion going. And otherwise, I thank you all for watching and I do hope to catch you in the next one.